So we had discussed on paper, that our global strategy is going to be to get, first of all, these eyes involved. That those are going to be critical to providing the context for how we take this point from here down to here, right? So let's go ahead and reference in the eyes, yeah? So we know that step one is select mouth, but also eyes, right? And in this case, I'm going to start changing my data buckets so it's a bit more clear for whoever's using this script. So I'm going to say this is the mouth, right? I'm going to copy that. I'm going to say these are the eyes. And now is the first time that we've actually, so if I grab this guy and I right click, I say add to group, but we're actually going to go out there and we're going to literally select two curves. And it's the first time we've utilized the eyes. So again, if I click him, you can see that they're kind of flickering on and off in green. And we had said that we wanted to get, as part of this, we'd say get the midpoint, but also we want to get the centroid, which we had seen before was the area component. We already have all the tools we need here to get the center points of those eyes. We'll need that as part of step 3 in order to start to provide the context for where this point right here is going to go. So now we say I have the midpoint of the mouth and I have the two center points of the eyes, and we had said that before we can move the point down, what we wanted to do is we wanted to establish maybe a fourth step that was more like get the midpoint of a line between the eyes. A little bit of compound movement here. So I'm just going to move these guys. So number 4 is no longer this. We say create a line, yeah. And between these two guys, here's our first foray into something kind of awkward. We have a list of information here. Everything we've dealt with so far has been one thing at a time coming out of each one of these outputs, yeah? But in general, that's not what you have. Normally you get multiple things coming out of one output. And in this case, we have 2 points. So this is where we get to meet our first new friend that we just teach you about. It's a computational engineer's main thing is to be able to cherry pick information out of a list. And in Grasshopper, that's called list item. And list item, what does he do? He retrieves a specific item from a list. And what does he take in? He takes in a list and an index. So if we want to inspect more than just hovering for a list information, one of the key tools we use is a panel. So you either grab it from up there where I just grabbed it from, or you say panel. Same thing. And what this will do is it'll show you the list in a more user-friendly format. In this case, we can see all the options for us to see information, and that's why Grasshopper and Dynamo are so easy to get involved in coding, because you could either click on this and you could see the information visually, you could hover over this and see it as sort of a preview of the list, or you could pull out the panel and really see the indices and everything else. It's all there for you. And in this situation, if I wanted to say grab one of these 2 points here, I would go and I would give it to list item, and list item comes with the index of 0 programmed in it right away. So it's giving me this one right here. Now, is that the one I want? It's one of the ones I want. You might be asking, why is it index 0? And it's because computers count from 0, 1. They count from 0. They're not like humans where they count from 1. So again, empathy with the machine, understanding that if you want the first item in the list here, you actually want the 0th index of that list. And then the key thing is here, some Grasshopper components, if you zoom in on them, you see here, they get this plus sign. So if we just do a plus sign, what this means is it's getting the list item at I plus 1. So now we've just forced this situation to where each one of these is now in its own bucket. We didn't change the data at all. We just split it up. You can see this one right here is at y value 3.29, which is at 1, and this one is at y value of 2.74. That's just the first foray that we'll have into using what is a very extremely useful component, one that we'll revisit quite a few times, and I'm sure we'll be back to it. So let's not go into that too deep, because as you can see, once you've managed to use your first time of using lists, by the way, should be noted, keep an eye on the color of your wires. In this case, I have sort of a hollow wire. That means it's a list of information pumping through the veins of my script. In this case, and in every other case in our script, it's a solid wire like this, which means it's one item. So Grasshopper is really trying to help you out by doing that, so try and take note of these things. And we had said, actually, we're not quite done here. We said we wanted the midpoint of that line that we just created. So let's do that. Right, getting closer. So we had said between these 2 points, we've effectively defined the vector that would show us the translation, right? So how can we try and find out how to do this? Well, first of all, let's say we've been doing vector here many times, but let's just this time, and that would be our first instincts rather. We would say vector and look for stuff randomly. Let's see if we can find it the other way, which is vector coming up here and just kind of randomly looking through, and maybe even using the emojis to our advantage, just kind of skimming through which one would help us. In this case, I can already tell just if I know I have 2 points, this one already, without even reading the English, screams to me, just with the emoji, that he's the right one. Create a vector between 2 points. Bingo, yes? I drop him out here, and what does he say? The first point. Well, we already have the first point, which would be this guy. From this guy to this guy would define a vector. Now, how do we know if we got this right? And this is a key skill of any computational engineer. This is a really important skill. How can I visualize, much like how did I get this line right? We don't talk about lines as numbers and words. We don't talk about points as, 3 numbers. We show the picture. So just like that, how can I show that this vector is correct? And that's where I'll introduce you to the display tab up here, where there's a lot of nice things, and even some specifically made for vectors. In this case, we want to display this vector. Not everything. Vector is more like a math. It's not actually a geometry. So only geometries will have previews. And in this case, we just need to use this tool right here to be able to display the vector, just so that we know that we're doing things correctly. So what does this take in? It takes in an anchor point for the vector and the vector. So let's look at the vector by giving it the vector for v, and let's say we anchor him at this point right here. Boom. So there we go. We can already see the picture that was sketched out before. Now Grasshopper's doing the work for us, which is great. Let's investigate a little bit. What's this U? It says unitize. So this is the unit vector. If we say set Boolean to true, right? Now it should be, if I just do a distance over here in Rhino, he's about 1 meter, right? So he's unitized. Let's keep him unitized for now. And again, this guy's just here for good measure. We don't really need him for the final thing, but he's there for helping us learn. He's a tool set that we may use in the future, so let's keep him in mind. And again, guess what? We had said this guy right here was our final port of call. So if I take this vector now, which we've been after, and I use him, what happens? I don't see anything. What's going on? Why didn't it work? It says it returned something for me. So we just learned in this episode that to look more into something, you could do 3 things, right? You could hover, you could pull out a panel, but for geometric objects, what should we do? We should probably zoom into them. And in this case, I can show you, again, we could middle mouse wheel and we could press this button and it shows us that. Is there any reason why we think that this operation didn't work correctly, considering the inputs. We gave it this point, we gave it this vector, and it gave us this point right here. It makes complete and utter sense, yes? So what should we do right now? Let's go back to the drawing board and let's think a bit more about how we take all of this information and finally get it down to our final algorithm.